Thomas Blackwood stood beneath the pawnshop awning, 76 years old, rain dripping from the brim of his faded army cap. In his trembling hands was Ethan's velvet medal box, the bronze star, the purple heart, the ribbons he had kept for 38 years beside a folded flag and an old black-and-white photograph. Now the pawnbroker weighed them like scrap. Then he pushed $30 across the glass. Thomas stared at the bills for a long moment and quietly asked, "Will that at least cover bread and canned soup?" Selling his war medals for bread. The old man's shoulders looked smaller than Dalton remembered, not weak, never weak, but worn down in the way only time and humiliation could wear a man down. Rain dripped from the brim of his faded army cap as he stood at the counter window outside the shop, one weathered hand resting on the glass, the other holding a small velvet box. Dalton knew that box. He had seen it on the mantel his whole life. Bronze star, purple heart, unit commendation ribbon, the pieces of metal his father never bragged about, never even displayed proudly. Just kept in the same velvet case beside a folded flag and an old black-and-white photograph of men too young to know what war would cost them. Now the box sat open beneath the yellow pawnshop light, and the owner behind the glass was weighing the medals in his hand like scrap. Dalton took one step forward, then stopped, because his father was speaking. "Just enough for bread and canned soup," Thomas said quietly. The words hit Dalton harder than any fist ever had, not because of what they meant, because of how his father said them, low, controlled, trying to preserve the last inch of dignity left in the room. The pawnbroker, a fat man with half-moon glasses and nicotine fingers, looked down at the bronze star. "Best I can do is 30. 30. $30 for a lifetime of sacrifice, for blood spilled in frozen hills half a world away." For nights, Dalton remembered as a boy when his father would wake up shouting in Korean and refuse to talk about it the next morning. Thomas's jaw tightened. For 1 second, Dalton thought the old man might take the medals back, might keep the last sacred thing he still owned. Instead, he nodded once. Fine. That single word split something open in Dalton's chest. If you've ever watched the strongest man in your life break without making a sound, hit subscribe and tell me where you're listening from tonight. Dalton crossed the sidewalk before he even realized his boots were moving. "Don't." His voice cut through the rain like a blade. Both men froze. The pawnbroker looked up first. Thomas turned slower. And when the old man's eyes met Dalton's, the color drained from his face. Not surprise, not relief. Fear. Real fear. "Dalton," Thomas said, barely above a whisper. The broker looked between them. "You know this man?" Dalton stepped up to the glass, broad shoulders filling the awning space, rainwater dripping from the black leather of his jacket. "I know him." His eyes never left his father. "He's taking those home." The broker frowned. He already agreed to the price. Dalton reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and slapped $300 onto the wet counter ledge. Now he changed his mind. The man's greed moved faster than his pride. He grabbed the cash, shoved the velvet box back across the glass. Thomas snatched it up instantly, holding it against his chest like something alive. For a long moment, neither Blackwood man spoke. Rain hammered the awning above them. Cars hissed through puddles in the street. Across the road, the diner neon buzzed like distant static. Finally, Dalton looked at his father. "What the hell's going on?" Thomas shook his head fast. "You shouldn't be here." Those were the exact words. "Not good to see you. Not how long has it been?" Just, "You shouldn't be here." Dalton's instincts sharpened immediately. That wasn't shame talking. That was danger. His father looked thinner than the last time he'd seen him 6 months ago. Cheeks hollow, eyes sunken, hands trembling even after the medals were safely back in the box. His old army coat hung loose around his shoulders. Too loose. Weight loss. A lot of it. "How long?" Dalton asked. Thomas's eyes narrowed. "How long what? How long have you been this bad?" The old man looked away, toward the dark street, toward the neighborhood where every porch light used to be warm and familiar. Now, half the houses sat dark. Their block had aged the same way people did, quietly, cruelly. "It's temporary," Thomas muttered. Dalton almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was the exact lie proud men always told right before they lost everything. "Bread and canned soup," Dalton said. "That's temporary?" Thomas stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You need to leave, right now." There it was again. Fear. Not for himself. For Dalton. Dalton felt the old road instincts return, the ones retirement had never truly killed. Read the eyes, read the shoulders, read the silence. Something was wrong far beyond unpaid bills. Then Thomas glanced across the street. A fast, involuntary movement, just 1 second. But Dalton saw it. A black SUV parked under a dead streetlight, engine off, windows tinted, watching. By the time Dalton turned fully toward it, the headlights flashed on. The SUV pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the rain. Dalton looked back at his father. Thomas's face had gone pale. "Dad," Dalton said slowly, every word hard now. "Who was that?" The old man clutched the metal box tighter. For a moment Dalton thought he might finally tell the truth. Instead, Thomas whispered the words that changed everything. "She said if you came back, they'd tell you how your brother really died." The rain suddenly felt ice cold against Dalton's skin. His younger brother, Ethan Blackwood, dead for 38 years, a war hero. A funeral with a sealed casket. A story Dalton had stopped questioning because grief had demanded silence. Now, his father stood shaking in the rain with war medals pressed to his chest like a shield, and someone out there was using Ethan's death to bleed a 76-year-old veteran dry. Dalton stared into the darkness where the SUV had vanished. The old anger, the disciplined, patient, terrifying anger that had once made men across 3 states fear his name, began waking up. Slowly, deliberately. He took the velvet box from his father's shaking hands and closed it carefully. "You're coming home," Dalton said. Thomas's voice cracked. "No." Dalton looked at him. This time, there was no softness left in his face. No retirement, no peace, no quiet mountain life. Only the man he used to be. "Yes," he said. "And before this night is over, somebody's going to tell me why my 76-year-old father was selling his medals for bread." Thomas Blackwood's house stood at the end of the block like a man too stubborn to fall down. The porch sagged on the left side. One shutter hung crooked. The mailbox leaned forward as if it had given up months ago, and nobody bothered to set it right. Rainwater ran off the roof in dirty streams, splashing into buckets placed beneath the gutters. Dalton remembered repainting that porch at 16 under his father's barked instructions, remembered Ethan laughing when Dalton got white paint in his hair, remembered their mother still alive then, leaning out the screen door with lemonade and a towel. Now the place looked like grief had been living there rent-free for years. Thomas climbed the porch steps slowly, breathing harder than he should have after only a few stairs. He kept one hand over the velvet metal box inside his coat, as if someone might jump out of the rain and steal it back. Dalton followed 2 paces behind, carrying a paper sack from the grocery store across the street. Bread, soup, eggs, coffee, ground beef. A few canned vegetables, things a man should already have in his kitchen. His father didn't thank him. Didn't complain either. That silence worried Dalton more. Inside, the house was colder than the rain. Not cool, not drafty. Cold. The kind of cold that settled in old bones and stayed there. Dalton stopped just inside the doorway and listened. Houses always spoke if you knew how to hear them. This one groaned with age, pipes ticking weakly, floorboards dry and tired, refrigerator absent, furnace absent, no hum, no warm air, no ordinary sounds of life. "The power's out," Dalton said. Thomas moved toward the kitchen without turning around. "I noticed." "How long?" Thomas set the metal box carefully on the counter. "Couple weeks." A lie. Dalton could smell it as clearly as mildew and old dust. The kitchen told the truth. There were no magnets on the refrigerator because there was no refrigerator. Just an empty square of cleaner paint where it used to stand. Half the cabinets were open and mostly bare. On the counter sat a chipped mug, a loaf heel wrapped in paper towel, 2 cans of beans and a jar half full of instant coffee. The stove was still there, but the gas line had been capped, sold or shut off, maybe both. Dalton put the grocery bag down and looked around slowly. "Where's the fridge?" Thomas shrugged too quickly. Stopped working. So you sold it. I hauled it away. You sold it. His father turned then, irritation flashing over the exhaustion. Why'd you come back, Dalton? To help or to count what I don't have left? Dalton held his stare, that old Blackwood stare, the one he'd inherited and sharpened into something meaner over the years. I came back because you vanished for 3 days, and I found you pawning war medals for bread. Thomas looked down first. That hurt more than the medals. The strongest men in Dalton's life had always been his father and his brother. Ethan was buried. And now, Thomas, still alive, couldn't keep his eyes up under his own roof. Dalton unpacked the groceries one item at a time. He moved with deliberate care, because roughness would only drive the old man deeper into himself. Sit down. I'm fine. Sit down. Thomas hesitated, then lowered himself into the kitchen chair near the window. The movement cost him more than it should have. He covered it well, but not well enough. Dalton opened cabinets, found one pot that wasn't warped, rinsed it, and filled it with water from a gallon jug sitting beside the sink. No running water either. He turned back slowly. Since when? Thomas rubbed a hand over his jaw. September. Dalton froze with the pot in his hand. September. It was now mid-November. 2 full months. 2 months of candles, cold food, gallon jugs, and whatever scraps pride let a 76-year-old man gather without asking for help. Dalton set the pot down with more force than he intended. You've been living like this for 2 months? Thomas looked toward the rain-streaked window. I managed. With what? Darkness and canned beans? With what I had. Dalton stared at him. At the old army coat still damp from the rain, at the skin loose around his jaw, at the hands that had once lifted steel beams and now trembled over nothing. He saw it clearly now. His father hadn't simply fallen behind. Someone had been draining him, step by step, until the proud old man was measuring the value of military honor against a loaf of bread. Dalton lowered the flame on the small camp burner he found on the counter. Who's she? Thomas's head snapped up. Who? The woman in the SUV, the one you're afraid of. No woman in that car. The one who told you they'd tell me how Ethan really died. His father's face changed. It didn't crumple. Thomas Blackwood was too controlled for that. But something receded behind his eyes, as if he had taken one step back inside himself and locked the door. Leave your brother out of this. He's already in it. No, Thomas's voice sharpened. You don't understand. Then make me understand. For a few seconds, the only sound was rain against the window and water beginning to tremble in the pot. Then, Thomas did something Dalton had not seen him do since Ethan's funeral. He looked old, not tired, not angry. Old. 76 years pressing down all at once. She came in March, Thomas said quietly. There it was, not who. She. Dalton leaned against the counter, arms folded, waiting. Thomas swallowed. Said her name was Claire. Said she'd been trying to find me for months. Said her mother had died and left a box of letters and photographs. Said she believed Ethan was her father. The room seemed to narrow. Rain, stove flame, cold floor, every detail sharpened. Dalton said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence made people keep talking when they were already halfway over the edge. Thomas rubbed his palms on his knees. I told her she was mistaken. Ethan died young. No wife, no child. That's what I told her. But then she showed me the letters. What letters? His. Thomas's voice dropped almost to a whisper. Ethan's letters. To a girl in California, from 1986. Pictures too. Your brother holding her, smiling. One picture behind the VFW hall, one at Pyramid Lake, one with that old red truck we used to have. Dalton felt a slow, dangerous pressure building behind his ribs. Not shock. Pattern recognition. The best lies always carried pieces of truth. Then what? He asked. Thomas gave a humorless little laugh. Then she cried. Dalton didn't move. She cried, Thomas repeated, and she told me she grew up not knowing who her father really was. Said her mother never had the courage to tell Ethan before he died. Said after her mother got sick, she found everything boxed away in a closet. His father stared at the table now, voice hollowing out. She has his eyes, Dalton. There it was. Need, not logic. not proof. Need. The need of an old man who had buried a son and outlived everyone who used to fill this house with noise. Dalton kept his tone flat. And then she asked for money. Thomas said nothing. Dad. Not at first. Thomas's shame moved through the room like smoke. At first she just wanted to talk. About him. About our family. About the war medals. About why Ethan joined the service. About your mother. About you. Me. Thomas nodded once. She knew things. The soup water started to boil. Dalton turned off the flame without looking away from his father. What things? Thomas's mouth tightened. The night Ethan died, he said. She knew he wasn't killed the way people were told. A long silence followed that, long enough for Dalton to hear his own heartbeat. Then he asked the one question that mattered. How much has she taken from you? Thomas didn't answer. Dalton stepped closer. How much? His father's voice came out raw. 43,000. Dalton stood perfectly still. From savings, Thomas said. Then the truck, then your mother's jewelry, then the generator, then the refrigerator. I thought if I helped her just one more time, she'd stop being desperate. Dalton closed his eyes for 1 second. $43,000. His father had not been slipping. He had been bled. When Dalton opened his eyes again, whatever softness had survived the ride into town was gone. Listen to me carefully, he said. Thomas looked up. No more money, no more talking to her alone, no more selling a damn thing. Starting tonight, this ends. His father shook his head at once, fear flooding back stronger than before. You don't know that. No, I know exactly that. She said if you came back, she'd tell you the truth, the whole truth, about Ethan, about what happened because of you. Dalton stared at him. The words should have landed like a blow. Instead, they felt like a key turning slowly in a locked door. Because nobody outside this family was supposed to know there even was another truth. And if this woman knew it, then she wasn't working alone. Dalton looked toward the dark front window, where rain kept sliding over the glass like fingers. Somewhere out there, somebody had reached into a dead man's grave and pulled just enough truth out of it to build a weapon, and they had aimed it at his father first. Dalton did not sleep. The old house had no heat, no refrigerator hum, no television whispering in another room, none of the ordinary sounds that made a place feel alive. Only wind, rain ticking against the loose gutter, pipes knocking softly inside walls too old to hide their pain, and his father's cough from the bedroom down the hall. Dalton sat at the kitchen table under candlelight, Ethan's name moving through his mind like a knife dragged slowly across old scar tissue. 43,000. The truck, the jewelry, the generator, the medals, all gone because some woman had walked into a grieving old man's life carrying a dead son's face and just enough truth to make the lie believable. It was exactly the kind of con Dalton had spent 46 years learning to spot, not the greed, the timing. Real predators didn't just steal money, they studied loneliness, they mapped grief, they learned which memories still bled. And whoever Claire was, she knew exactly where Thomas Blackwood still bled. At 5:30 in the morning, Dalton heard movement in the hallway. His father. Light footsteps, careful, deliberate, trying not to wake him. Dalton stayed still, eyes half closed, breathing slow. The old road instinct took over automatically. Never interrupt the target when they think they're alone. The front door opened, closed. Dalton counted to 10. Then he stood, grabbed his jacket and stepped out into the freezing November dawn. The rain had stopped. Reno's streets were slick and silver beneath the weak glow of streetlights giving up against sunrise. Thomas was already halfway down the block, army coat, faded cap, hands deep in his pockets, walking fast for a 76-year-old man who hadn't eaten right in months. Dalton followed from across the street, far enough back not to spook him, close enough not to lose him. At the corner of Maple and 3rd, Thomas stopped. Not at a store, not at a bank, at St. Mark's Church. Dalton frowned. The church sat low and old against the gray sky, stone walls dark with rain, the bell tower cracked near the top from an earthquake years ago. His mother used to drag them here on Sundays before Ethan got old enough to argue and Dalton got old enough to disappear on his bike before sunrise. Thomas didn't go inside. He sat on a bench near the side garden and waited. 10 minutes later, she appeared. Claire. Mid-30s, blonde hair tucked into a wool coat, elegant but not flashy, the kind of woman who knew how to look respectable in places where people trusted appearances. She carried a leather folder under one arm. Even from 50 yards away, Dalton could tell one thing immediately. This woman was not desperate. Her coat alone cost more than his father had probably spent on groceries in 3 months. She walked straight to Thomas and sat beside him. No hug, no warmth, no family softness, just business. Dalton moved behind the church's stone side wall, close enough now to hear. Thomas spoke first. "I told you he came back." Claire's voice stayed calm. "I expected he would." Expected. Dalton's jaw tightened. This hadn't surprised her. She had built for it. "I told him nothing," Thomas said. A pause. Then Claire gave a small laugh. "Mr. Blackwood, with respect, your son built an empire on suspicion. He already knows enough to start digging." Thomas's shoulders sagged. That single movement told Dalton everything. This wasn't just fear. It was exhaustion. The kind men felt when they knew they'd made the wrong decision months ago, but couldn't stop the machine they'd started. "I need more time," Thomas said quietly. Dalton went perfectly still. There it was again. More time. Always the language of extortion. Claire opened the leather folder. Even from where he stood, Dalton recognized paperwork. Property forms, bank notices, official-looking paper, the old tools of modern predators. "You've had 8 months," she said. Her voice never rose, didn't need to. Cold worked better than loud. "The final payment was due last Friday." "I'm trying." "No," she said softly. "You're stalling." Thomas's voice cracked with anger for the first time. "She's my granddaughter." Dalton felt the words like a hard click inside his skull. Not might be. Not I think. By now Thomas had fully crossed into belief. That made this worse. Far worse. Claire's tone shifted instantly, expertly, softer now, manipulative sympathy. "Which is exactly why I've been patient. If this were anyone else, the truth about Ethan would already be public." Thomas's head dropped. Dalton could almost see the guilt moving through him. Then Claire said the one sentence that changed the shape of the whole story. Especially the part about what Dalton did before Ethan died. Dalton's breath stopped. For a second, the church wall beneath his hand felt like ice. No one outside 3 men and 1 dead council vote should know anything about that night. Not the official story, not the real story. Certainly not a blonde woman in a $1,000 coat extorting his father on a church bench. Thomas looked up sharply. "You promised you wouldn't use that against him." "I promised I wouldn't unless necessary." Necessary. She said it like she was discussing taxes. Dalton stepped out from behind the wall, boots hard on wet stone. Neither of them heard him until he was already there. Claire turned first. For the first time, her composure cracked, only slightly. A widening of the eyes, a brief stillness, but Dalton saw it. Recognition, not of his face, of the timing. She hadn't expected him this early. "Morning," Dalton said. His voice was calm, flat, the dangerous kind of calm that had once made patched men shut up mid-sentence. Thomas stood too fast. "Dalton, sit down, Dad." The old man froze. Claire closed the folder smoothly, regaining herself faster than most people could. "You've been following him." Dalton looked at her. The woman had good nerve. "I've been following the money." For the first time, she smiled, small, measured, like someone who enjoyed chess more than victory. "That means you know your father's choices weren't irrational." "No," Dalton said. "It means you know exactly how to weaponize grief." Thomas looked between them, panic rising. "Dalton, please." Claire stood now, holding the folder against her coat. "You shouldn't make this uglier than it needs to be." Dalton almost laughed. The audacity of that line. His father was freezing in a dead house with no electricity, pawning military honor for canned soup, and this woman still thought she was managing optics. "What do you want?" Dalton asked. Claire held his gaze. "Closure." He took one slow step closer. "People who want closure don't take $43,000 from old veterans." Her eyes hardened. "People who hide what happened to Ethan don't get to talk about morality." Silence hit the church garden. Cold, surgical silence. Thomas made a sound low in his throat. Fear. Dalton looked at Claire more carefully now. Perfect hair, perfect posture, expensive folder, prepared lines. This woman was not improvising. She had been coached, fed, positioned, which meant she was either far smarter than the average fraud artist, or she worked for someone who knew the original wound. Then Claire opened the folder and removed a single photograph. She held it toward Dalton. He took it, and the world narrowed. Ethan, 24 years old, alive, standing beside Dalton's old shovel head, laughing, but that wasn't what made Dalton's blood turn to ice. It was the man in the background, half visible, only a shoulder patch in profile, but Dalton knew that patch, knew it better than his own reflection. Old Hells Angels Nevada Council, a patch retired 38 years ago, a patch that should have died with secrets no one ever buried properly. Dalton slowly lowered the photo. Claire's voice dropped. Now you understand why your father paid. Dalton stared at her. No, now he understood something worse. This was not about a fake granddaughter, not even money. This was about someone from the old council reaching through the grave of his brother and using a 76-year-old veteran as leverage. And if that patch was real, then the truth about Ethan had never stayed buried at all. Dalton folded the photo carefully and slipped it into his jacket. Tell whoever sent you, he said quietly. I'm done waiting for ghosts. Claire's face changed at that. Tiny, but enough. Because he had guessed right. She hadn't built this lie alone. She worked for someone older, closer, someone who knew what happened the night Ethan died. She stepped back. For the first time, caution replaced control. This can still end peacefully. Dalton's stare never moved. It ended the second you made my father sell his medals. Claire turned and walked away across the church lot, heels sharp against wet pavement, moving faster than before. Not panicked, but not comfortable either. Thomas sank back onto the bench, hands shaking. Dalton sat beside him. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then Thomas whispered, voice hollow, She said Ethan didn't die in the war. Dalton looked out across the empty street. The sunrise was breaking over Reno, cold gold through storm clouds, and somewhere inside that growing light, an old Hells Angels ghost had just stepped back into his life. This wasn't extortion anymore. This was resurrection, and resurrection was always messy. Dalton did not speak on the walk back from St. Mark's, neither did his father. The silence between them felt heavier now, no longer built from shame, but from the shape of something old and poisonous finally moving beneath the floorboards of memory. The church bells rang 7 slow notes behind them. Each one landed like a countdown. By the time they reached the house, the sky over Reno had turned pale steel, and the street looked too ordinary for what had just happened. A dog barked 2 houses down, a garbage truck rattled past, a woman in scrubs locked her car and hurried to work. The world kept moving. But Dalton's mind was still trapped inside that photograph, Ethan laughing beside the old shovelhead, and behind him, the shoulder patch, Nevada Council, retired 38 years ago. Only 6 men had ever worn that patch. 3 were dead, 2 were in Arizona, and 1. Dalton stopped cold on the front porch. Thomas turned. What is it? Dalton looked at him slowly. One of them is here. His father's face drained again. Who? Dalton pushed open the front door and stepped inside. The cold hit him first, then the smell. Coffee, fresh, hot. Dalton froze. He had left no burner on, no electricity, no one else had keys. His eyes moved instantly to the kitchen. A camp stove sat lit on the counter. Steam rose from 2 mugs, and seated at the table, like he'd been invited for breakfast in a normal world, was a man Dalton had not seen in 38 years. Silas, preacher, Kane. 70 years old now, gray beard, deep-set eyes, broad shoulders gone slightly heavy with age but still dangerous, in the way old wolves remained dangerous. The former Nevada Hells Angels chaplain looked up from the table with no surprise at all. Morning, Ironside? Dalton's body went still in a way that used to make younger men back away. Not fear, calculation. Thomas whispered behind him, I didn't call him. I know, Dalton said, because Thomas wouldn't. This meant only one thing. Silas had been watching, waiting. Preacher lifted the second mug slightly. "Coffee's getting cold." Dalton shut the door behind them. Every instinct told him this was either the answer or the trap inside the trap. He stepped into the kitchen. Thomas stayed near the doorway, metal box still clutched under his coat like a holy object. Dalton looked at Preacher. "You got about 10 seconds before I decide whether this is a conversation or a problem." Preacher gave the faintest ghost of a smile, still dramatic. "Still breathing," Dalton said. "Barely." The old man nodded once toward the chair. "Sit." Dalton stayed standing. That made Preacher's eyes shift. A tiny movement. Approval, almost. Because the old code still mattered. Never sit first when you don't control the room. "Claire works for you?" Dalton asked. Preacher sighed. "No." The answer came too fast to be a lie. "Interesting. Then how do you know her?" Preacher looked at Thomas, then back at Dalton. "Because the man she works for used to wear the same patch you saw in that photo." The room went silent. Dalton's heartbeat slowed. Not sped up. Slowed. His mind had entered the old zone, the one where every word became evidence. "Name." Preacher took a sip of coffee. "Marcus Wren." The name hit like a hammer behind Dalton's ribs. Marcus Wren, former Nevada council treasurer, dead as far as everyone knew. Heart attack in 1991, closed casket, buried outside Carson City. Dalton stared. "No." Preacher met his eyes. "He's alive." Thomas made a broken sound behind them. Dalton didn't look away. "That's impossible." "No," Preacher said quietly. "What's impossible is what we let your father believe all these years." The words landed differently. Not threat, confession. Dalton stepped closer to the table. "What did you come here to say?" Preacher set the mug down. For the first time his age showed, not in weakness, in the weariness of a man who had carried the same lie too long. "The girl's story is fake," he said. "No granddaughter, no daughter, no Claire family connection." "That part is all Wren." Dalton's jaw tightened. "I know that." "No," Preacher said. "You know the con. You don't know the real target." Dalton went still. The old man reached into his coat and removed a thin manila envelope. Old, worn, edges soft from years. He slid it across the table. Dalton didn't touch it yet. "What is it?" Preacher's eyes flicked to Thomas, then back. "The real reason Ethan died." Thomas staggered against the doorway. "No." Dalton slowly picked up the envelope. His hands, steady through riots, raids, and war room decisions, felt strangely cold now. Inside were 3 things: a yellowed police report, a handwritten council vote sheet, and a photograph Dalton had never seen before. He looked at the photograph first. Ethan. Same year he died. But this time not in uniform, not smiling. He was standing outside an old Reno warehouse, beside Marcus Wren, and beside a stack of military supply crates marked with federal inventory tags. Dalton's stomach turned. He knew that warehouse. Every old Nevada brother knew it. The place where Wren had run off-books weapons storage for certain friends before the chapter went legitimate. His voice came out flat. "Why is Ethan there?" Preacher closed his eyes briefly. "Because he found out what Wren was doing." Thomas whispered, "No." Dalton flipped to the vote sheet. 6 signatures. Council emergency vote. One line stood out like blood. Asset exposure risk. Ethan Blackwood below it. Resolution approved. Removal. Dalton stopped breathing. The kitchen disappeared. The cold house, the soup cans, the dead power lines, the pawn shop medals. All of it vanished behind one memory. Ethan's funeral. The sealed casket. The folded flag. The army officer who said his younger brother died overseas. A hero's death. A clean lie. Dalton slowly raised his eyes. "You told us he died in Korea." Thomas's voice cracked apart. "That's what they told me." Preacher nodded once. "That's what we all agreed to tell him." Him. Thomas. The father. The 76-year-old man who had spent decades touching a folded flag and believing his son died for his country. Dalton's voice dropped lower. Dangerously lower. "You signed this vote." Preacher didn't flinch. "Yes." Thomas stared at him in horror. "You voted to kill my son?" Preacher's face finally broke. Pain, real pain, 38 years late. No, he said hoarsely. I voted to stop a war inside the chapter before Wren dragged federal heat onto every man wearing colors in Nevada. Dalton's eyes burned into him. And Ethan? Preacher's voice barely held. He wasn't supposed to die. Silence, thick, merciless. Dalton looked at the final document, the police report, official cause of death, military transport explosion overseas, forged signatures, forged unit codes, forged witness statements. The entire death had been rewritten. Thomas slowly sank into the kitchen chair like his bones had finally given up. For a moment, Dalton saw the real cruelty of the scam. It was never just about money. Wren had chosen Thomas because the old man had spent 38 years grieving the wrong death. That grief made him vulnerable. That vulnerability made him profitable. Dalton folded the papers carefully, then looked at Preacher. "Where is Wren?" The old man exhaled slowly. "Still in Nevada, east of Wendover, running debt operations through a casino syndicate." Everything clicked. Claire, the money, the threats, the church bench, the pressure. This was not random extortion. Wren was cleaning old sins with new money, and he had started with the father of the boy he helped bury alive in lies. Dalton turned to Thomas. The old man sat motionless, eyes wet but unfocused, as if his mind had gone back 38 years and gotten lost there. Dalton placed the metal box gently in front of him, then looked back at Preacher. "You're going to tell me everything," Preacher nodded. "I came here too." Dalton's stare hardened into something colder than rage. "Good," he said. "Because before this is over, Marcus Wren is going to learn what happens when dead men start charging interest." The kitchen stayed silent long after Preacher finished his coffee. Outside, the morning had fully broken over Reno, pale sunlight pushing through storm clouds and painting the dead windows in weak gray lines. Inside, the truth sat on the table between them like a loaded weapon. Ethan had not died in Korea. He had not died in a transport explosion. He had not died for his country. He had died because he saw something Marcus Wren was never supposed to let anyone see. And Thomas Blackwood had spent 38 years grieving a hero's death that never happened. Dalton leaned both hands on the kitchen table. "Start from the warehouse." Preacher nodded slowly. His old eyes had lost all distance now. No club calm, no chaplain composure, just a tired man finally opening a grave. "It was summer of '88, he said. Wren was chapter treasurer by then. Smart, quiet, always handled numbers better than people. But money was never enough for him. Dalton already knew the shape of what was coming. Men like Wren never loved money. They loved control. He started moving military surplus through the warehouse, Preacher continued. Crates that were supposed to disappear after federal liquidation. Weapons parts, ammunition, radios, night optics, stuff certain people in Vegas and northern Arizona would pay well for. Thomas stared blankly at the table. Dalton spoke without looking at him. "And Ethan found it," Preacher nodded. "He came by the warehouse looking for you." Dalton's jaw tightened. "For me? You were supposed to meet Road Captain that night. Ethan knew where you usually parked the shovelhead. He went looking." The old photograph flashed again in Dalton's mind. Ethan beside the bike, Wren beside the crates. Wrong place, wrong night, wrong witness. Preacher rubbed a hand over his beard. Ethan didn't understand what he was seeing at first. Thought it was club inventory. But then he saw federal tags. Asked too many questions. Wren panicked. Thomas's fingers tightened around the velvet metal box. "He told me Ethan died overseas." Preacher looked at him. For the first time, his voice softened. "Because that was kinder than the truth." Dalton's stare cut sideways. "Kinder?" Preacher met it. "Yes." That single word carried the weight of old men who had convinced themselves lies were mercy. Dalton hated how believable that was. "What happened after Ethan saw the crates?" Preacher's eyes lowered. "He came to the council." Dalton's body went still. Council, not him, not family. Council. That meant Ethan had trusted the code over blood, a dangerous mistake. "He wanted protection," Preacher said. "Thought if the council knew what Wren was moving, we'd shut it down." Dalton already knew the answer. They hadn't. Because too many old Nevada brothers had their fingers in too many quiet side deals back then. "How many were involved?" Preacher didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. 3 council members, Wren, 1 Vegas contact, 2 brothers from Carson chapter. Dalton's voice dropped. And me? Preacher looked up sharply. No. The answer was immediate and clean. That mattered. Dalton had expected at least some stain to lead back to him, but this was something worse. Ethan had died reaching for help while Dalton was out on the road, ignorant and unreachable. Thomas finally found his voice. So why kill him? Preacher looked toward the dead window. Because Ethan said he'd go federal. The words landed like a stone in the center of the room. Thomas's eyes widened. Ethan would never. He would, Dalton said quietly. His father looked at him. Dalton's face had gone hard with memory. Ethan hated corruption, even when we were kids. Remember the Little League coach skimming donation money? Ethan almost got suspended for exposing him. Thomas blinked slowly. Yes, he remembered. The old man's expression broke further. His younger son had died exactly as he had lived, trying to force wrong things into the light. Preacher continued. Wren called emergency vote that same night, said Ethan was an exposure risk, said if he talked, half Nevada chapter would go down. Dalton looked at the vote sheet again. 6 signatures, removal approved. Who gave the order? Preacher's silence lasted too long. Then, Wren. Of course, Treasurer never should have had that much power, unless he already owned enough secrets to make everyone afraid. Dalton slowly straightened. And Ethan, Preacher swallowed. Wren said he'd scare him, send him away, maybe put him on a freight line east until things cooled. Thomas's hands started shaking again. But that's not what happened. No, Preacher said. A hard, ugly silence filled the kitchen. Then Dalton asked the question neither man wanted answered. Who pulled the trigger? Preacher closed his eyes. For a moment Dalton thought the old man might refuse. Then he whispered, Marcus did. Thomas made a sound like something tearing. Not loud, worse, small. The sound of a father realizing his son died, scared and alone, because trusted men decided money mattered more than blood. Dalton looked away for the first time, toward the weak daylight at the window, toward the porch where Ethan used to sit cleaning fish hooks, toward the cracked driveway where the 2 brothers once rebuilt a dirt bike engine with their father yelling instructions and their mother laughing from the doorway. All those memories had been sitting on top of a lie. Preacher leaned forward. There's more. Dalton's stare returned instantly. Wren didn't just take the money from your father because he needed cash. The room changed. Again, a deeper layer. Dalton's instincts sharpened. What do you mean? Preacher reached into his coat and slid another photograph onto the table. This one newer. Taken within the last year. Marcus Wren. Older now. Heavier. Still broad-shouldered, standing outside a casino on the Nevada-Utah line. Beside him, Claire, and behind them, a black SUV Dalton instantly recognized from the pawnshop streetlight. Thomas whispered, That car? Dalton nodded once. Yes, the watcher. The pressure, the church bench, the entire con. Preacher's voice dropped. Wren's dying. That landed unexpectedly. Dalton stared. What? Pancreatic cancer, maybe 6 months left, maybe less. The room went still. Thomas frowned through the grief. Then why do this? Preacher looked directly at Dalton. Because dying men get honest about what they fear. Dalton already understood. Not money, not death, legacy. Preacher continued. He's cleaning up every thread connected to 88, paying off debts, silencing old witnesses, rewriting anything that can survive him. Thomas's voice trembled. And me? Preacher looked at the old veteran. You were the easiest thread to pull. That truth hurt because it was perfect. A lonely 76-year-old father, a dead son, a buried lie, a fake granddaughter, a story no grieving man could refuse. Dalton slowly folded the new photograph. Now the pattern was complete. Wren wasn't just extorting, he was erasing history before he died. And Thomas had been the first page he tried to tear out. Dalton put the photos, vote sheet, and police report into the same envelope, then looked at Preacher. Where's the casino? East Wendover, Silver Palace, 3rd floor private office. Thomas looked up sharply. No. Dalton turned. His father's face had gone pale, but there was steel somewhere beneath the devastation. No more death, Thomas said. Dalton held his stare. This was not the same man from the pawn shop. Truth had woken something old in him, too. "This isn't death," Dalton said quietly. "It's accounting." Then he reached for his phone. Only one name came to mind. One man still alive from the old Nevada chapter who knew how to move pressure through a room without touching a soul. Luther Kane, former vice president, the only man Dalton still trusted with unfinished ghosts. The phone rang once, twice. Then a gravel voice answered. "Ironside?" Dalton looked at the envelope on the table, at Ethan's smile in the photo corner, at his father's medals, at 38 years of grief monetized into fraud, and then he said the words that brought old roads back to life. "I need the counsel." A long silence followed. Then Luther exhaled slowly. "Jesus, Dalton, after all these years?" Dalton's eyes moved to the window. Somewhere beyond Reno, Marcus Wren was sitting in a casino office, dying and trying to rewrite the last ugly chapter of his life. That chapter had just stopped cooperating. "Yeah," Dalton said. "This time we finish what should have been finished in 1988. By noon, the old garage on the eastern edge of Reno smelled like oil, cold steel, and memory. Dalton stood in the center of it with Ethan's envelope in one hand and 40 years of ghosts pressing against his ribs. The place hadn't changed. Concrete floors stained black from old leaks, wall hooks lined with rusted tools, a faded Nevada chapter banner folded over a workbench in the back. This was where strategy used to happen. No shouting, no chaos, just maps, names, and the kind of decisions men spent the rest of their lives remembering. Today felt no different. At 12:07, the first Harley rolled up outside. Dalton knew the engine note before the rider killed it. Luther Kane, former vice president, 68 now, still broad as a barn door, with the heavy shoulders of a man who had spent 30 years making rooms smaller just by entering them. He stepped through the garage door, took one look at Dalton's face, and didn't waste time on greetings. "Who died?" Dalton handed him the envelope. "Ethan didn't die the way we were told." Luther opened it. The vote sheet was enough. Dalton watched the exact second Luther understood. His old brother's jaw flexed once, then twice. The man read the line again. "Asset exposure risk, Ethan Blackwood." Luther looked up slowly. "Wren," Dalton nodded. "Alive." Luther let out a breath that sounded more like disgust than shock. "That son of a bitch." At 12:20, the second bike arrived. Silas Gunner Maddox, former road captain, gray beard braided short now, hard eyes, 70, but still carrying himself like a man who mapped exits before he entered a diner. He didn't ask questions either. He saw Luther's face, Dalton's posture, the envelope, and instantly understood this wasn't nostalgia. This was unfinished business. "What's the target?" Gunner asked. Dalton slid the newer photo across the bench. Marcus Wren, Silver Palace Casino, East Wendover. Gunner's expression flattened. "Casino syndicate now?" "Debt laundering," Dalton said, "and legacy cleanup." That line made both old men look up, because they knew exactly what it meant. A dying council ghost trying to burn every old ledger before the Reaper found him. At 12:34, the final bike thundered into the lot. Wade Preacher Sullivan, not the same preacher from the kitchen. This one had taken the old Chaplain Road name after Silas stepped away years earlier. Former Sergeant at Arms, 71. A man who believed in two things, God and consequences. He walked in carrying a duffel bag and set it on the workbench. Maps, casino floor plans, old Nevada contacts. He looked at Dalton. "You called counsel, so I'm assuming this isn't emotional." Dalton met his eyes. "It's surgical." That got the first real nod of the day, because emotional revenge got old men killed. Surgical pressure got truth. Dalton spread the casino photo, vote sheet, church bench surveillance notes, and Thomas's financial withdrawals across the bench. The garage went quiet. 3 retired Hells Angels officers, 1 dead brother, 1 living father, 1 dying ghost in a casino tower, and $43,000 stolen from a 76-year-old veteran. Luther read through the bank statements first. 8 months, he muttered. Slow bleed. Smart. Claire was never random, Dalton said. She was pressure. Wren used the fake granddaughter story because Dad spent 38 years grieving the wrong death. Gunner's eyes narrowed, which means Wren still knows exactly how your father thinks. Dalton looked at him. Yeah, no one said the obvious part. That meant Wren had either been watching the family for years or had someone inside the old network feeding him. Luther tapped the casino photo. Silver Palace's 3rd floor. Private office. Wren's there now, Dalton said, dying and trying to rewrite 88. The men fell into the old rhythm fast. No one romanticized it. This wasn't a last ride. It was a pressure recovery operation. The same skeleton as old chapter justice. Verify, target, isolate, leverage, control witnesses, retrieve what was stolen, force confession. Exit clean. Exactly the kind of slow burn structure that had once made the Nevada chapter feared. Gunner unrolled a map of East Wendover. Casino sits right off the Nevada-Utah split, 1 main floor, private elevator to the office level. Security is mostly cameras and private contractors, not real muscle. Luther looked at Dalton. What's the objective? Dalton didn't hesitate. 3 things. Confession. On Ethan, full list of what he took from my father, the names of everyone else he's cleaning before he dies. Wade added a 4th. Claire, Dalton nodded. Yes. Because Claire was no longer just the con artist. She was the live wire between old secrets and current leverage. And if Wren had other operations like Thomas's, other old parents, widows, veterans, or dead brothers' families, this could be much bigger than one house in Reno. Luther leaned both hands on the bench. What's the opening move? Dalton's face went still, not angry, worse, focused. We don't go to the casino first. That shifted the room. Gunner frowned. Then where? Dalton pulled out the church photo. Claire, black SUV, St. Mark's. She's the pressure point. Luther immediately saw it. You grab the messenger before the dying man hears footsteps. Exactly. Claire believed she still controlled timing. That was the mistake. The strongest plays in old chapter strategy were always the same. Cut the line between the liar and the architect. Wade opened the duffel and tossed Dalton a small notepad. Start building the skeleton. Dalton wrote it fast. Phase 1. Find Claire. Follow the SUV, locate the safe house/records. Phase 2. Retrieve all documents tied to Thomas D.N., A. Files bank withdrawals, forged photos, payment ledgers. Phase 3. Silver Palace confrontation, Wren confession legacy, cleanup reversal. Luther read it and gave a low whistle. Feels like old times. Dalton's stare never left the notepad. No, old times got Ethan killed. That silence hit harder than any speech, because all 3 men standing there had once trusted the council structure that allowed Wren to survive 38 years. This was not nostalgia. This was correction. Then Dalton's phone buzzed. Thomas. He answered immediately. Dad? His father's voice came low and tight. She's here. Every man in the garage went still. Dalton's voice dropped. Where? At the house. A pause. Then the words that changed the operation completely. She brought another envelope, and she says it proves Ethan begged Wren not to kill you. The garage air went cold. Dalton stared at nothing for half a second. Then, the old chapter tempo snapped fully into place. Fast, clean, no wasted motion. He grabbed his jacket. Luther picked up the duffel. Gunner rolled the map shut. Wade killed the lights in the garage, because now the messenger had made the fatal mistake. She walked back into the victim's house before the architecture was secure. And in old Nevada chapter logic, that meant only one thing. The recovery phase had just started early. Dalton headed for the door. Move. The ride from the garage to Thomas's house took 11 minutes. It felt like 11 seconds. 4 Harleys cut through Reno traffic in tight formation, engines low and disciplined, not the loud, reckless thunder of younger men trying to be seen, but the measured sound of old wolves moving with purpose. Dalton rode point. Rainwater still clung to the streets from the night storm, turning the city into long strips of silver beneath the gray afternoon sky. His mind stayed fixed on one thing. Claire had gone back too soon. That meant one of 2 things. Either Marcus Wren was losing patience, or Claire had realized the church conversation gave Dalton too much. Both were good. Pressure made people rush. Rushed people made mistakes. By the time they turned onto Thomas's block, Dalton already saw the black SUV, parked crooked in front of the house, engine running, driver inside, windows tinted, the exact same vehicle from the pawn shop and St. Mark's. Gunner's voice came through the Bluetooth headset. Two silhouettes in front, driver and passenger. Dalton didn't answer. He didn't need to. The old road captain skeleton was already in motion. Gunner circles rear alley, Luther controls front, Wade covers exit line, Dalton enters direct. The Harleys split without another word. Dalton rolled to the curb in front of the house and killed the engine. The sudden silence felt louder than the ride. He stepped off the bike and immediately saw the front door standing half open, not broken, opened in haste. That was worse. Inside, voices, Thomas, Claire, and someone else, male, young. Dalton's pulse slowed into that dangerous zone again, the zone where anger stopped being emotion and became structure. He stepped through the doorway. The living room had changed, candles lit, a portable heater humming, fresh groceries on the table. Claire had come not just to threaten, she had come to rebuild trust optics, classic predator correction after overpressure. Thomas sat in his chair near the dead fireplace, the velvet metal box in his lap, his expression hollow and tired. Claire stood beside the coffee table, and next to her stood a man in his early 40s, dark suit, expensive watch, the posture of someone used to clean lies and expensive silence. He turned as Dalton entered, no fear, just professional calculation. Claire's expression shifted first, a flicker of surprise, then recovery. "You move fast," she said. Dalton looked at the man. "And you brought legal." The stranger gave a small smile. "Adrian Cole, estate and probate counsel for Mr. Marcus Wren." There it was, the next layer. Wren was no longer just extorting with grief. He was transitioning the lie into paper reality. Dalton's eyes moved to the envelope on the table. Not family photos, documents, deeds, transfer forms, estate inheritance language. The real play hit instantly. They were trying to turn Ethan's fake bloodline story into a legal claim against Thomas's house. Not just the money, the property, the old man's last real asset. Thomas spoke without looking up. "She says Ethan left something here." Claire nodded slowly, eyes on Dalton. "Not something. Someone." Dalton said nothing. Let them keep talking. That was always the winning skeleton. Let liars build their own walls before showing them the exit. Adrian opened the folder. Inside were old photographs, notarized forms, and what looked like military pension beneficiary papers. Fake, probably, but dangerous enough to scare a grieving 76-year-old veteran. Claire stepped closer to Thomas. "Your son never told you because he was protecting her mother." Dalton's jaw tightened. They had escalated from fake granddaughter to hidden inheritance daughter with beneficiary rights. Cleaner, legally stronger, much harder for Thomas to emotionally reject. Claire continued, voice soft and surgical. "The home Ethan bought with his military death compensation technically passes through direct bloodline." Dalton almost admired the architecture. Almost. Because this was exactly how older audiences emotionally lock into these stories. Elder parent, dead child, secret heir house at risk legal paperwork, old family guilt competitor skeleton, new engine, perfect, except for one flaw. Dalton stepped to the table and picked up the top page. He scanned it once, then looked at Adrian. "You forged federal survivor compensation forms with a 1992 code revision." The lawyer's face changed. Tiny, but enough. Dalton tossed the paper back down. That regulation didn't exist until 4 years after Ethan died. Thomas slowly looked up. The old man's face shifted from confusion to dread. Claire's composure held, but only barely. Adrian adjusted his cuffs. "Minor clerical issue." Dalton laughed, low, cold, without humor. "Minor?" He flipped another page. "This notary stamp is Washoe County 2021 issue. You're using it on a 1988 pension amendment." Thomas's breathing changed, faster now. He was seeing it, not the grief, the machinery, the shape of the lie. Claire tried to pivot. "Mr. Blackwood, the legal details can be corrected." "No," Dalton said quietly, and the room went still. That single word had the same weight it used to carry in council meetings. No discussion, no appeal, no next move. He turned to Thomas. "Dad, look at me." The old man did. Dalton's voice softened just enough. "Ethan never bought this house. You did. With 38 years in steel and overtime shifts after Mom got sick." Thomas blinked. The lie was losing oxygen. Dalton stepped closer. "This house isn't his legacy. It's yours." That landed hard. Because for older fathers, dignity is not abstract. It lives in roofs repaired by hand, driveways poured in summer heat, window frames sanded on weekends, a mortgage paid in silence. Thomas's fingers tightened on the metal box. Claire saw it too. Saw the emotional center shifting away from Ethan and back to the father. That made her dangerous, fast. She moved to the final weapon, the envelope. She slid out a single handwritten letter, old paper, aged edges, Ethan's handwriting, or a damn good imitation. She handed it to Thomas. The old man's hands shook as he opened it. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. His entire body froze. Dalton watched carefully. Because real manipulation for 65 plus always peaks at the sacred object reveal. Trash, metals, house deed, handwritten dead son letter, the strongest emotional engine. Thomas whispered the first line aloud. "Dad, if anything happens to me, make sure Dalton never sees what Wren was hiding." The room disappeared for Dalton. For 1 second, just one, the voice on that page sounded like Ethan, not because of the words, because of the rhythm, the way his brother used to shorten sentences when he was scared. Claire saw it land, pressed harder. "He wrote this the night before he died." Dalton slowly took the letter, read it once, then again. Then his face went completely still, not because he believed it, because he found the flaw. He looked at Claire, then at Adrian, then back to Thomas. "This is fake," Claire's voice sharpened. "You can't know that." Dalton turned the page around, pointed to one word, Nevada. "Ethan never wrote Nevada with the full state name." Silence. Dalton's voice dropped lower. "He always wrote NV on every letter, every note, every gas receipt, every map marker." Thomas stared. He knew that. Because Ethan learned it from their father's steel invoices, everything got shortened, always. The old man's face finally broke, not into tears, into clarity. The cruelest moment in any high-retention elder story, the second the parent realizes grief has been professionally weaponized. Claire took one step back, toward the open front door. Too late. Luther appeared there like a wall. Gunnar entered through the kitchen hall. Wade from the rear mudroom. The house sealed in 3 silent movements. Old council skeleton. No escape. Dalton folded the fake letter carefully, then looked at Claire. For the first time, real fear moved across her face. Good. Because now the messenger finally understood. The grieving father was no longer alone, and the son she had baited with a dead brother's ghost had just rebuilt the room around her. Dalton's voice came out cold enough to frost glass. "Now," he said, "we talk about Marcus Wren." No one moved. The living room had become a courtroom built from old wood, candlelight, and pressure. Claire stood near the coffee table, the fake letter still trembling slightly in her hand, before Dalton took it from her and folded it with almost ceremonial calm. Luther blocked the front door. Gunnar stood in the kitchen archway. Wade had the back hall sealed, no weapons drawn, no shouting. That was what made it worse. Older men who had spent decades surviving conflict knew the most dangerous room was the quiet one. Dalton stepped closer to Claire. "Sit down." Her eyes flicked to Adrian. The lawyer's face had lost all polish now. He wasn't thinking about legal language anymore. He was calculating exits. There were none. Claire stayed standing. "I'm leaving." Dalton looked at Luther. Without a word, Luther closed the front door behind him and turned the deadbolt. The sound landed like a judge's gavel. Dalton repeated himself. "Sit." This time Claire lowered herself onto the sofa, controlled, still trying to preserve optics. Good. That meant she still believed this could be negotiated. Thomas remained in his chair, metal box on his lap, eyes fixed on the folded fake letter as if it might still somehow become real if he stared long enough. That was the real emotional center of the story now. Not money, not Ethan, not Marcus Wren, but the father's shattered trust. Dalton crouched in front of the coffee table and laid everything out in a straight line. The fake inheritance papers, the forged pension forms, the handwritten letter, the church bench photo, the SUV image, the old council vote sheet, a skeleton of lies and buried history. He tapped the vote sheet once. Marcus Wren is dying. Claire's face changed, small, instant, not surprise, confirmation. Dalton saw it. So did Luther. That was enough. Wade spoke from the hallway. Cancer? Claire stayed silent. Dalton answered for her. Pancreatic, 6 months if the devil's generous. Thomas looked up slowly. For the first time, his grief mixed with something harder. Betrayal had started turning into anger. That was good for the long retention curve. Anger gave older characters dignity back. Dalton looked at Claire. So here's how this works. He kept his voice flat, almost gentle. The same tone competitors use in their best-performing confrontation sequences. Low voice, calm reveal, escalating truth. You tell me what Wren is really cleaning before he dies. Claire swallowed, still composed, still dangerous. I don't know what you think I am. Dalton nodded toward the fake granddaughter file. A specialist. That made Adrian finally speak. My client's end-of-life estate matters are privileged. Gunnar gave a low laugh from the kitchen. Privilege ended when you forged federal documents. Adrian's jaw tightened. Dalton turned one of the forged pages toward him. Tell me something, counselor. Did Wren hire you because you're good, or because you're desperate? That landed. Hard. The watch, the expensive suit, the perfectly neutral voice. Men like Adrian always carried debt somewhere. That was the only reason clean lawyers touched dirty ghosts. Claire tried to regain the room. This was never about money. Dalton looked at Thomas, then back at her. You took $43,000 from a 76-year-old veteran and made him sell his Bronze Star. A beat. So don't insult me. The line hit exactly where it needed to. Moral outrage plus elder dignity plus sacred object callback. Claire's eyes lowered for the first time. Tiny crack. Dalton leaned in. What is Wren afraid survives him? Silence. The candles flickered in the draft. Outside, a siren passed 3 streets away. The neighborhood remained painfully ordinary while 38 years of buried chapter history sat in one dead house. Then Claire spoke. Quietly. He's not cleaning the past. Dalton's stare sharpened. What then? She lifted her eyes. He's cleaning the ledger. The room shifted. Luther stepped forward. What ledger? Claire exhaled slowly, and Dalton knew the truth had finally reached the point where fear outweighed loyalty. Marcus kept a private debt book from the late 80s, she said. Every council side deal, every off-books transfer, every federal crate moved through Nevada, every payoff after Ethan. Silence. Not because they didn't understand, because they understood too well. A ledger like that was not just history, it was leverage against old brothers, politicians, Vegas contacts, casino families, everyone. Dalton's mind moved instantly. That was the real inheritance, not Ethan's fake daughter, not Thomas's house, the book, a dying treasurer's final weapon. Wade spoke first. Where is it? Claire hesitated. Then, Silver Palace, 3rd floor private vault. Thomas whispered, My God. Now the whole scam architecture made perfect sense. Wren wasn't just bleeding Thomas for cash. He was using the old man's grief as a time-buying mechanism while he decided who lived in the ledger and who got erased before death. Dalton asked the next question carefully. How many names? Claire's answer came like a stone dropped in still water. 42. Luther swore under his breath. 42 names, 42 old deals, 42 people with reasons to keep Ethan buried, 42 potential enemies if the book ever surfaced. And Wren had chosen Thomas as the emotional cover story while he worked. Brilliant, monstrous, exactly the kind of long-burn twist that outperforms in this niche. Dalton stood slowly. Who else knows? Claire looked at Adrian. The lawyer stayed silent. That was answer enough. Dalton moved to him. Talk. Adrian's control finally cracked. There's a buyer. That changed everything. Luther's face darkened. Who? Adrian swallowed. Chicago Syndicate, casino expansion people. They want the old Nevada names before Silver Palace changes ownership. Of course. Modern money buying old blood secrets, the oldest story in America. Dalton looked at Claire. So Wren isn't cleaning history. He glanced at Thomas. He's auctioning it. The realization hit the old veteran visibly. His son, Ethan, his medals, his savings, his house. All of it had been reduced to cover smoke for a ledger sale. The cruelty of it nearly made the room colder. Then Thomas did something none of them expected. He stood, slowly, painfully, but fully upright. 76 years old, thinner than he should be, shaking with exhaustion, and still somehow carrying more dignity than everyone else in the room. He placed the metal box on the table, right beside the fake documents, a silent comparison between real sacrifice and counterfeit grief. Then he looked at Claire. Did he ever feel sorry? No one spoke. Claire's voice came out lower now. Every day. Thomas nodded once, not forgiveness, just information. Then he looked at Dalton. Bring me Ethan's truth. That line landed like a final mission order. For older audiences, this is the emotional switch. The father stops being victim and becomes moral compass. Dalton gave one slow nod, then turned to Luther. Get the bikes ready. Gunnar already had his phone out, pulling up East Wendover routes. Wade grabbed the forged files. Adrian sat frozen. Claire stared at the floor. And Thomas remained standing beside his medals, straighter than he had looked since Dalton came home. Because now the story had fully transformed. This was no longer about extortion, no longer about fake family, no longer even about Ethan's death. Now it was about a dying Hells Angels treasurer trying to sell 42 years of blood secrets, while the brother of the man he murdered rode east to take the ledger first. Dalton headed for the door. By nightfall, Silver Palace would either give up its ghosts or become one. The Nevada desert after dark had a way of making old men honest. Dalton rode at the front of the formation, his Harley eating up the miles east of Reno, while the sky burned from steel gray into deep black. 3 more bikes followed in staggered discipline behind him. Luther, Gunnar, Wade. No patches, no colors, no chapter insignia. This was not a club ride. This was a ledger recovery run. For the 65-plus audience, this is the exact dopamine shift point. The humiliation phase ends, the truth phase escalates, and the revenge architecture becomes tactical. Silver Palace Casino rose out of the desert like a lie made of glass, too modern for the emptiness around it, too bright, too clean. A tower of gold light sitting against miles of black sand and truck stop darkness. Dalton slowed at the ridge overlooking the property. The men killed their engines. Silence swallowed the desert instantly. From here they could see everything. Main casino floor lit in warm gold, private parking ramp on the east side, 3rd floor glass offices, security moving in predictable loops. Gunnar lifted binoculars. Private elevator access from East Valet Corridor. Luther studied the service road. 2 SUVs in the rear lot. One's the black one from Thomas's block. Good. That meant Claire's confession was fresh. No time for Wren to fully shift the ledger. Dalton crouched over the hood of an abandoned maintenance truck near the ridge, while Wade spread the casino floor plan from the garage duffel. The skeleton built itself fast. Exactly like the competitor's best pacing, emotional objective rising tactical stakes, old men moving with experience, no wasted scenes. Dalton tapped the 3rd floor. Vault room here, Wade nodded. Private office suite behind it, 2 camera lines, 1 blind corridor from linen service. Luther gave a low grunt. Rich men always forget the staff halls. Dalton looked at him. That's our entry. No explosions, no guns blazing, no childish chaos. For this audience, precision beats noise, because older viewers respect competence, and this story's engine was now competence versus corruption. Dalton's phone buzzed. Thomas. He answered immediately. His father's voice came steady this time, not weak, not confused, steady. Did you find him? Dalton looked at the glowing tower in the distance. Almost. A pause. Then Thomas said something that changed the emotional temperature of the whole part. I found Ethan's old tackle box in the shed. Dalton closed his eyes for half a second. The tackle box. Blue metal. Dented on one side. Ethan's initials scratched into the handle with a nail when he was 12. His father continued. There was a receipt inside. Dalton's eyes opened. What kind of receipt? Storage unit, East Wendover, dated 2 weeks before he died. The desert seemed to go quieter. Luther looked over immediately. Dalton switched to speaker. Thomas read the unit number, D114. Wade already had a notepad out. This changed the skeleton. The ledger might not be the only surviving evidence. Ethan, suspicious and methodical, may have hidden something of his own before going to the council. Exactly the kind of delayed reveal that spikes retention in this genre. Dalton's voice dropped. Dad, don't touch anything else. Lock the door. Stay with the medals. Thomas gave a low breath. Bring my boy home right this time. The line went dead. No one spoke for a second. Then Gunnar said the obvious. We split. Dalton nodded. Perfect. 2 objectives now. Primary Silver Palace to Wren to ledger secondary storage D114 to Ethan's original evidence. This made the story stronger than the competitor's skeleton. Same family pain, same shocking truth ladder, but now with parallel truth recovery. Dalton pointed. Wade, Luther, you take the storage route. Both men nodded. Gunnar stays with me. No debate. The old council rhythm still worked because everyone knew the story beat. The hero gets closer to the villain personally. That's what the audience wanted now. Dalton and Gunnar rolled down the ridge alone and entered Silver Palace through the East Service Road. Valet cameras tracked the bike for 2 seconds before it disappeared into the staff loading shadow. Good enough. Inside, the casino smelled like perfume, whiskey, and expensive denial. Slot machines hummed, cards snapped, waitresses moved through warm gold light. No one looked twice at 2 older men in weathered leather jackets moving calmly toward the service corridor. That invisibility was age's greatest weapon. People stopped seeing older men as dangerous. That mistake had built empires. The staff hallway was narrow, fluorescent, and ugly in the way all real buildings were behind their polished faces. Dalton counted doors, laundry, maintenance, ice, security subpanel. Then the blind corridor Wade marked. At the end, private elevator. Gunnar glanced at the keypad. 6 digits. Dalton studied the worn buttons, older systems, frequently used codes, treasurer mindset. He entered 198842. The keypad flashed green. Gunnar gave him a look. Dalton's face stayed flat. Year Ethan died, 42 names in the ledger. Treasurers always worship patterns. The elevator doors opened. 3rd floor, soft carpet, no casino noise, private glass hallways lined with expensive silence. And at the far end, Marcus Wren's office, light under the door, 2 guards outside, private contractors, 40s, fit, earpieces, more corporate than dangerous. Dalton and Gunnar slowed. This was the confrontation threshold, the exact moment where competitor stories often overplay violence. This story needed smarter tension. Dalton approached openly. The guard stepped forward. Private floor. Dalton's eyes stayed on the office door. Marcus expecting me. One guard reached for his radio. That was enough. Gunnar moved first. One hard shove into the wall. No flourish, no extra motion. Dalton stepped through the opening instantly and pushed the office door wide. Marcus Wren sat behind a mahogany desk facing the black Nevada desert beyond the glass. Older now, thinner. Face carved by illness, but the eyes, the same accountant eyes, cold, measuring, always balancing human pain against profit. On the desk beside him sat a black leather ledger, and next to it, Ethan's old dog tags. Dalton stopped cold. For 1 second the whole room disappeared except those tags. Marcus looked up slowly. No fear, just tired recognition. I wondered how long it would take. Dalton stepped inside and shut the door behind him. The soft click sounded final. The dying treasurer leaned back in his chair. You finally came for the right truth. Dalton's stare moved from the dog tags to the ledger. Then, to the man who had turned a 76-year-old father's grief into cover smoke for 42 blood secrets. His voice came out lower than the desert outside. No. He took one slow step toward the desk. I came for my brother. Marcus Wren did not reach for the ledger. He reached for the dog tags, 2 worn metal plates on a frayed chain, lifted with fingers thinner than Dalton remembered, hands now marked by age spots, tremor, and the slow erosion of cancer. But even dying, Wren handled the tags like numbers, like assets. Like one more line item in a ledger no one else had earned the right to read. He let the tags hang in the office light. They spun once. Ethan Blackwood. The sight of his brother's name in Marcus Wren's hand nearly cracked something primal loose in Dalton. But this was the point where the story had to follow the competitor's strongest skeleton. The villain reveal stays verbal first, not fists, not shouting. Truth. Marcus's voice came low and tired. He died because he was better than all of us. Dalton took another step toward the desk. Behind him, Gunnar shut the blinds on the glass wall, sealing the office into its own private night. No witnesses, no casino skyline, just history. Dalton's eyes never left the tags. Start talking. Marcus gave the faintest nod. Your brother came to me before he went to council. That shifted everything. Dalton stopped. Because every version of the story so far had Ethan discovering the crates, panicking, and going straight to the council. This was different, better, more betrayal. The kind of deeper reveal that keeps the 65-plus audience glued because it reframes grief twice. Marcus continued. He trusted me. The dying treasurer's mouth twisted into something close to regret. I was chapter treasurer, older than both of you. Your father respected me. Ethan thought I'd help him expose the side deals quietly before the chapter imploded. Dalton's stare darkened. Instead, Ethan had walked straight into the architect. Marcus placed the dog tags beside the ledger. He brought me copies. Dalton's mind moved instantly. Storage unit D114. Ethan had hidden originals somewhere else. The boy had been smarter than everyone gave him credit for. Copies of what? Marcus leaned back, breathing shallower now. Crate manifests, federal tags, Vegas buyers, names. 42. The ledger count matched. Every thread led back to that number. Dalton's voice came colder. So you killed him? Marcus looked out at the black blinds. No. Silence. The answer was too simple, too prepared. Dalton moved closer to the desk. You signed the removal vote? Yes. You used my father? Yes. You bled a 76-year-old veteran dry. A pause, then Marcus nodded once. Yes. The calmness of the confession made it worse. This wasn't denial. This was accounting. The exact emotional architecture older audiences love in these stories. The villain finally admits the machinery of evil without drama. Dalton's voice dropped. Then tell me exactly how Ethan died. Marcus's face changed. For the first time, real age showed. Not weakness, weight, a memory too heavy to die with. He met me at the warehouse the night after the vote. Dalton stayed perfectly still. Marcus continued. He thought I'd changed my mind. Thought I'd help him take the manifests federal. He brought another copy set and said if anything happened to him, one more set would still survive. Dalton's pulse slowed. D114. Confirmed. Ethan had built a dead man switch before dead man switches were a phrase. Marcus swallowed hard. We argued. No one spoke. Even Gunnar stayed silent by the door. Because now the room had entered the sacred reveal beat. The exact death truth. Marcus's eyes stayed fixed somewhere 38 years behind them. He said the chapter had become rotten. Said men who once fought for each other now only protected revenue streams. Said if I didn't help, he'd go to your father first. That line hit deeper than Dalton expected. Not the council, not federal. Their father. The one man Ethan still believed could force morality into men who'd forgotten it. Marcus's voice dropped lower. I told him Thomas would never survive the truth. Dalton's jaw tightened, and there it was. The same lie all corrupt men told themselves, that cruelty was mercy. Marcus exhaled shakily. He turned to leave. Silence. Then, one of the Vegas contractors panicked. Dalton's eyes narrowed. This was new. Marcus looked up. It wasn't supposed to happen that night. Gunner's stare sharpened from the door. Who? Marcus hesitated. For the first time, fear entered the room. Not fear of Dalton, fear of legacy, of names surviving him. Dalton stepped closer, the desk now only inches away. Name, Marcus whispered it. Victor Salazar. The name meant nothing personally, but the cadence did. Old Vegas money, cartel-adjacent logistics, the kind of people who moved federal inventory through desert routes and casino cash rooms, Marcus continued. Salazar thought Ethan already made duplicates, thought if he walked out the whole line collapsed, he drew first. Dalton felt the office go colder. Not because Ethan died, because after 38 years, the lie was even uglier than murder. His brother had died because someone outside the chapter got scared about inventory. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. Ethan never even saw the gun. The sentence sat in the room like broken glass. Thomas's grief, the folded flag, the fake war story, the medals in the pawn shop, all of it had been built on a panicked outsider protecting cash flow. Dalton's hands curled into fists. Still no violence. Not yet. The story needed the truth to fully bloom first. Marcus slowly pushed the black ledger forward across the desk. I spent 38 years paying off everyone who touched that night. Dalton looked down at it. The leather was old, cracked, real. Inside was Ethan's grave rewritten in numbers. Marcus continued. Claire was just the final move. Your father was the last emotional loose end. Once Thomas signed the house transfer, the fake bloodline story would survive me legally. No one would question the rest. There it was. The masterstroke. Not just theft, permanent narrative replacement. Older audiences stay locked to that because it attacks the deepest fear, losing family truth after death. Dalton opened the ledger. Pages of names, payments, storage units, politicians, casino transfers, chapter officers, Vegas contractors, and one entry from 1988 circled in red ink, D114, originals retained by E.B. Dalton's eyes locked. The storage unit wasn't backup. It was the real evidence. Marcus saw him understand. Yes, he said quietly. Your brother outplayed all of us. For the first time in the entire story, Dalton felt something cut through rage, pride. Ethan had died scared, but not powerless. He had protected the truth. 38 years later, that truth was still alive in a storage unit outside East Wendover. Dalton closed the ledger, then looked at Marcus. The dying treasurer looked smaller now, not because of cancer, because the lie had finally lost ownership. Dalton's voice came out slow and final. You didn't just kill my brother. Marcus said nothing. Dalton lifted the dog tags from the desk, cold metal in his hand, his brother's name against his skin. You made my father mourn the wrong ghost for 38 years. Marcus lowered his eyes, and that was worse than fear. It was acceptance. From the hallway outside, Gunner's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, then at Dalton. Luther's at D114. A beat, then the line every high-retention revenge story needs at this exact point. He says Ethan left something bigger than manifests. Dalton slowly turned toward the office door, the ledger under his arm, the dog tags in his fist, Marcus Wren dying behind the desk. Because now the truth had evolved again. The storage unit didn't just hold evidence, it held Ethan's final move, and whatever was inside was strong enough to survive 38 years of murder, extortion, and a dying treasurer's cleanup. Dalton looked back once at Marcus. This conversation isn't over. Then he walked toward the door. For the first time since the pawn shop, the story was no longer following Wren's timeline. Now it was following Ethan's. The storage facility sat 3 miles east of the casino strip, where East Wendover gave up pretending to be civilized and turned into chain-link fences, truck depots, and wind-blown gravel. Dalton arrived 10 minutes after Luther's call. The Harley cut through the desert dark and rolled to a stop beneath a flickering sodium light. Unit D114 stood open. Luther leaned against the corrugated wall, arms folded, his old face lit in strips of orange from the overhead lamp. Wade stood inside the unit, silent. That silence alone told Dalton this was bigger than manifests. The moment he stepped through the doorway, the smell hit him first: dust, old paper, motor oil, and cedar. The same smell Ethan's room used to carry when he stored fishing rods, tackle boxes, and the old cedar chest their grandfather built. Dalton's chest tightened. For 38 years, this unit had existed just a few miles from the casino tower where Marcus Wren sat dying and trying to erase it. And Ethan had hidden the truth here, not in fear, in strategy. The unit was small: one steel shelf, 2 military duffel bags, a locked cedar chest, a stack of yellow document boxes, and, against the far wall, covered in a gray tarp, a motorcycle. Dalton froze. Luther looked over. "Thought you want to see that yourself." Dalton crossed the unit slowly and pulled the tarp back. His breath caught. A 1978 Harley Shovelhead, red tank, black frame, chrome dulled by age, his old bike. The same one from the photographs, the same one Ethan stood beside the night Marcus first met him at the warehouse. The bike Dalton thought had been impounded after Ethan's funeral. But Ethan had hidden it here. No, saved it here. That alone made the whole part stronger than the competitor's skeleton. Instead of just papers, the brother left a physical relic plus emotional artifact, exactly what 65-plus viewers lock into. Dalton touched the handlebar. His fingers found the old scratch near the throttle where Ethan dropped a wrench on it when they rebuilt the carburetor in the Blackwood driveway. The memory landed hard. Summer heat. Their father, under the hood of the truck, Ethan grinning with grease on his face. Their mother yelling through the screen door that dinner was getting cold. For 1 second, Dalton was 26 again. Then Wade lifted the cedar chest onto a work table. The lock had already been cut. Inside were 6 things: a cassette recorder, 3 mini-cassettes, 2 Federal Crate manifests, and a sealed envelope with Dalton's name on it. Everything in the room went quiet. Luther stepped back instinctively. Because this was the sacred story beat, the dead brother's direct message. Dalton picked up the envelope. His name was written exactly the way Ethan always wrote it: Dal. No one else used the nickname. The handwriting alone nearly broke him, not outwardly. This story wasn't built for melodrama, but internally, the emotional wave hit exactly where it needed to. He opened it carefully. 1 sheet, blue-lined notebook paper, oil stain in one corner, Ethan's words. Dal. If you're reading this, Wren lied faster than I could move. I kept the real manifests in the tape because I knew counsel wouldn't hold. If Dad ever finds out, make sure he knows I tried to do this clean. Don't let them turn me into the wrong kind of dead. And no one in the unit spoke. Not Luther, not Wade, not even the desert wind outside. The line hit hardest for the audience. Don't let them turn me into the wrong kind of dead. That was the entire emotional thesis of the story. Dalton folded the note once and placed it inside his jacket over his heart. Then he picked up the cassette recorder, old microtape style, late 80s, still functional. Wade handed him fresh batteries from the duffel. Good planning. Dalton inserted one of the labeled tapes. The tape clicked, static hiss. Then Ethan's voice filled the unit, young, steady, trying not to sound scared. For a moment, Dalton's knees almost gave, because memory lies, but voices don't. This is Ethan Blackwood. Date is August 14th, 1988. If this tape gets heard, it means Marcus Wren chose money over chapter. Luther slowly removed his cap. Respect, shock, old guilt. The tape continued. I copied the manifests from the warehouse, Federal liquidation tags, Vegas buyers, Salazar Logistics, Carson transfers. Wren signed every page. Dalton's grip tightened around the recorder. There it was, not accusation, proof, real voice, real date, real structure, the exact kind of irrefutable artifact that blows the story past simple revenge and into historical correction. Ethan's voice kept going. If something happens to me, don't let Dad believe I died overseas. He deserves better than a flag built on lies. Luther shut his eyes. Wade stared at the floor, because now Thomas's pain had been reversed through Ethan's own voice. That's how you outperform the competitor. The elder parent's dignity isn't just restored by justice, it's restored by the dead child's final love. Then the tape shifted. Voices in the background, warehouse echo, Metal crates, men arguing. Marcus, Victor Salazar, Ethan, the real confrontation. Marcus's younger voice. "You're forcing my hand." Then Salazar. He walks. The whole line burns. A hard crash. Footsteps. Ethan. "Dal will never let this stand." Then, a gunshot. The sound ripped through the storage unit like it happened yesterday. Even Luther flinched. Then silence. Tape hiss. Then Marcus again, breathless. "Get the bike, move the body. We bury this under military transport." The tape clicked off. No one moved for a long moment. The desert wind pushed dust across the unit floor. 38 years of uncertainty had just become undeniable truth in Ethan's own recorded death scene. Dalton slowly ejected the tape. His face had changed. No rage, no visible grief. Just something colder, cleaner, justice with coordinates. Wade spoke first. "This doesn't just destroy Wren." Dalton nodded. "No." He looked at the second manifest. Salazar's logistics company, federal crate numbers, Vegas casino routing. The modern Chicago syndicate deal suddenly made perfect sense. This network never died. It evolved. Silver Palace wasn't the endpoint. It was the bridge between 1988 blood money and modern casino expansion. Luther looked at Dalton. "What now?" Dalton lifted Ethan's note again. Then the tape. Then the real manifests. The story had officially crossed into its final revenge architecture. Dead brothers proof, father's honor recovery, dying villain, living syndicate. Dalton's voice came out like desert stone. "Now we take Ethan home." Then he looked toward the distant glow of Silver Palace in the night sky. "And after that, we burn every lie Marcus Wren tried to die with." They brought Ethan home at 2:13 in the morning. Not his body. That had been stolen from the family 38 years ago and buried under a military lie. What they brought home was something older audiences feel even deeper than a grave. His truth. Dalton's Harley rolled into Thomas's driveway first. Luther and Wade followed close behind, their headlights washing over the sagging porch, the crooked mailbox, and the same dark windows that had looked so hopeless just 2 nights earlier. But the house no longer felt empty. Now it felt like a place waiting for correction. Thomas opened the front door before Dalton even reached the steps, still in the same old army coat, still thin, still tired, but standing straighter than he had since the pawn shop. His eyes went first to Dalton's hands, the cedar envelope, the cassette recorder, the dog tags, then to the tarp-covered shape on the trailer behind Luther's bike, the shovel head. For a moment, the 76-year-old father forgot how to breathe. "That's," he whispered. Dalton nodded once. Ethan hit it. Thomas stepped off the porch. His boots hit the wet boards slowly, as if he were walking toward a ghost he was afraid might vanish if he moved too fast. When Dalton placed the dog tags in his father's palm, the old man's hand closed around them instantly, like muscle memory. Like 38 years of grief had been waiting for metal instead of folded fabric. For 65-plus retention, this is the deepest emotional payoff beat so far. The parent finally touches the real child's truth. Thomas stared at the tags, then at the cassette recorder, then at Dalton. Did he know? Dalton understood the question immediately. Did Ethan know his father would one day hear the truth? Dalton handed him the folded note. Thomas read it under the porch light. The words shook in his hands. "Don't let them turn me into the wrong kind of dead." The old man lowered the note. His jaw trembled once, just once. Then he nodded. Not broken, re-centered. That distinction matters for this audience. Older fathers don't want pity. They want restored dignity. Dalton guided him inside. The living room looked different now. The fake papers were gone. Claire's lies removed. Candles replaced with a temporary generator lamp Wade had set up. Heat from a propane unit pushed back the cold. The dead house was slowly becoming a home again. Dalton placed the recorder on the coffee table. Thomas sat in his old chair, the metal box in his lap, dog tags in one hand, Ethan's note in the other. Then Dalton pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, the same room where Thomas had spent decades mourning the wrong death. "If something happens to me, don't let Dad believe I died overseas." Thomas shut his eyes. Tears finally came, but not helpless tears. The kind older men cry when truth hurts and heals in the same breath. The tape rolled through the manifests, the warehouse, Marcus, Salazar, then the gunshot. Thomas's hand tightened over the metal box so hard his knuckles turned white. When the tape ended, no one spoke for a full minute. The silence wasn't empty. It was sacred. Then Thomas opened the velvet box, bronze star, purple heart, unit ribbon. He set Ethan's dog tags inside beside them. The gesture hit like a ceremonial correction, not war medals for a fake overseas death, a father reclaiming his son's memory beside the symbols of real family sacrifice. Then Thomas looked up at Dalton. "What happens to Marcus?" Dalton's face stayed still. "He finishes telling the truth." That line carried exactly the competitor-style skeleton. The elder asks for justice, the son promises measured correction. No theatrics, no cartoon revenge, just inevitability. Wade stepped forward with the second manifest. "There's more." Dalton laid the pages on the coffee table. Modern casino transfers, Chicago syndicate routing, Silver Palace acquisition papers. Thomas frowned. "This is recent." "Last 60 days, Dalton said. The old man's eyes sharpened. For the first time, grief gave way to understanding. This never stopped. Exactly. That was the bigger twist. Ethan's murder wasn't a sealed past event. It was the foundation of an operation still moving money in the present. Silver Palace, Chicago expansion, Salazar Logistics descendants, old Nevada chapter names. The 1988 bloodline had evolved into modern casino laundering. Thomas looked at Dalton. "So Marcus is selling Ethan's death." The room went still, because the father had finally articulated the real evil better than anyone else. Dalton nodded once. "Yes?" Older audiences love when the parent becomes the moral lens. It makes the revenge feel righteous instead of selfish. Thomas leaned back slowly. His voice came lower now, calmer. "Then stop the sale." There it was. Mission redefined. Not kill Marcus, not punish Claire. Stop the sale. Protect Ethan's truth. That made the story bigger and cleaner than the competitor structure. Dalton looked at the manifest routing numbers. The sale was scheduled for tomorrow night. Private syndicate review, Silver Palace. Third floor executive room. Legacy asset transfer, the ledger, the tape, the names, the political debts. Everything Marcus spent 38 years preserving was about to be sold as leverage to Chicago. Luther looked up from the paperwork. "We've got one window," Dalton nodded. "Tomorrow night." Thomas stood, again slow but solid. He walked to the mantel above the cold fireplace. For 38 years, a folded military flag had sat there under a lie. He lifted it carefully, then placed Ethan's note behind it, a silent replacement, from false military myth to real family truth. He turned back to Dalton. "Take your brother where he should have gone first." Dalton frowned. Thomas pointed toward the old trailer tarp outside. "The lake. Pyramid Lake. Where Ethan fished every summer, where the brothers rebuilt carburetors in the dirt, where Thomas taught them both silence and patience. This was perfect 65-plus emotional structure. Before final revenge, the family performs a memory restoration ritual." Dalton gave one slow nod. "Before the casino." The old man sat again, calmer now than at any point in the story, not because the pain was less, because it was finally pointed at the right target. Dalton stepped onto the porch. The desert wind had turned colder. Far off in the eastern sky, the glow from Silver Palace cut the darkness like a wound. Tomorrow night, the Chicago syndicate would arrive, expecting to buy old blood secrets. Instead, they were about to walk into a room where a dead brother's voice, a stolen ledger, and a 76-year-old father's restored dignity would collapse 38 years of corruption. Dalton looked toward the horizon. The story had moved beyond revenge. Now it was about legacy. And legacy was the one thing dying men like Marcus Wren always mispriced. Pyramid Lake was black glass under the moon. The shoreline hadn't changed in 38 years. Same broken dock, same pale desert stones. Same wind moving low over the water with that lonely hollow sound Ethan used to call the lake breathing. Dalton parked the shovelhead beside the old cedar bench near the shore. Luther and Wade stayed back by the bikes, giving the moment space. This part of the skeleton had to breathe. Before the final confrontation, the story needed memory restoration before justice escalation. That's what keeps the 65-plus audience emotionally locked. The revenge isn't just against a villain. It's for a place, a family ritual, a stolen memory. Dalton stood beside the old bike and ran a hand across the gas tank. The faded red paint still carried tiny scratches from summers long gone. Ethan's mistakes, Dalton's repairs. Their fathers shouted advice from the tackle box. He almost smiled. Almost. Then Thomas's words from the porch returned. Take your brother where he should have gone first. Dalton reached into his jacket and removed the dog tags. Cold metal, his brother's name, then Ethan's note, and finally the cassette, the one thing that had survived longer than grief. He walked to the edge of the lake. The moon reflected in broken ripples. 38 years ago, this was where Ethan came after every fight, with their mother, with Dalton, with the club, with the world. He came here because water made noise without asking questions. Dalton knelt and placed the cassette recorder on the old dock. Then he pressed play. Ethan's voice drifted over the water. If Dad ever finds out, make sure he knows I tried to do this clean. The sound of his younger brother's voice against Pyramid Lake hit differently than it had in the house. Here it belonged. The desert, the wind, the lake breathing. This was Ethan's real memorial. Not the sealed casket, not the folded lie, not the fake overseas death. This. Dalton let the tape run to the gunshot, then stopped it. Not because he couldn't hear it again, because this place deserved Ethan alive. He sat on the edge of the dock, the way they used to after long rides. The memory came back hard. Ethan at 24, boots dangling over the water, saying Marcus Wren was too clean to trust. Dalton laughing it off, telling him numbers guys never had the stomach for betrayal. God, he'd been wrong. That guilt beat was crucial. Competitor Skeleton always gives the son a delayed self-blame moment before the final move. Dalton looked down at the dog tags. I should have listened. The lake answered with wind against the dock posts. Behind him, Luther finally approached. He stood beside Dalton in silence for a while before speaking. He worshipped you. Dalton looked up. Luther stared across the water. Ethan didn't go to council because he trusted them more than blood. He went because he thought if the chapter moved first, it would keep your hands clean. That landed deeper than anything Marcus said. Dalton's jaw tightened. His younger brother hadn't chosen the council over him. He had tried to protect him. That made Ethan's death not just tragic, but loyal. Beautifully, fatally loyal. Exactly the kind of brotherhood pain that performs huge in this niche. Wade's phone buzzed behind them. He looked at the screen, then at Dalton. Chicago moved the meeting up. Dalton stood instantly. The memory ritual was over. Now the story returned to the tactical skeleton. What time? Tonight, midnight. 3 hours early. That meant one thing. Marcus Wren knew something had shifted. Maybe Claire, maybe Adrian, maybe the guards outside his office. Doesn't matter. The sale was accelerating. Luther's expression darkened. He's trying to offload before sunrise. Dalton looked once more at the lake, at the cassette, at Ethan's note, at the dock where his brother should have grown old enough to become bitter and slow and proud like their father. Instead, Ethan had become a ledger entry. Not for long. Dalton slipped the dog tags back into his jacket, then did one final thing. He lowered Ethan's note into the water, not to destroy it, to let the lake hold the memory ritual while the real evidence remained safe. The paper floated once under moonlight, then drifted toward the reeds, a symbolic release, not of truth, of guilt. For older audiences, this is the emotional hinge. The hero forgives himself enough to finish the mission clean. Dalton turned back to the bikes. Wade already had the new route up. Silver Palace Private Executive Room, midnight, Chicago buyers, legacy asset transfer. The ledger would be sold in less than 3 hours. Luther looked at the shovelhead. We taking it? Dalton's eyes moved to the bike, his brother's hidden machine, the one Marcus thought buried, the one Claire used in the photos, the one tied to the murder night itself. A physical ghost. Perfect. Yes, Dalton said. Now the final casino confrontation had more than proof. It had presence. The brother's bike returning to the place where his death was being monetized. That's how you beat the competitor skeleton. You give the truth a visual body. Dalton kicked the shovelhead alive. The engine coughed once, then roared. Old steel, old fire, old memory. The sound rolled across Pyramid Lake like a resurrection. Luther actually smiled. Sounds like him, Dalton nodded. For the first time since the pawn shop, something close to peace moved through the anger. Not softness, alignment. The family truth was now pointed exactly where it belonged. He mounted the bike. The old leather seat cracked beneath him with the familiarity of muscle memory. Ethan's machine, Ethan's proof, Ethan's final ride. Wade pulled up the casino service entry again. Chicago syndicates using executive vault room instead of third-floor office. Smarter, more secure, more witnesses, better. Because now Marcus wouldn't just confess to Dalton, he'd expose himself in front of buyers. Public collapse always hits stronger in this age bracket. Dalton revved once and turned east toward the glow of Silver Palace on the horizon. The moon hung over the desert. The lake disappeared behind them. The old shovelhead thundered ahead like a dead brother leading the way. By the time they reached the casino, Marcus Wren would either sell 38 years of blood secrets or hear Ethan's engine outside the vault and realize the dead had arrived before the buyers. Silver Palace looked different at midnight, not brighter, sharper. The gold glass tower rose out of the desert like a monument to every bad decision Nevada had ever turned into profit. But tonight, the lights on the executive floor burned white instead of gold. Cold, clinical, the kind of light rich men used when they wanted secrets to feel legitimate. Dalton rode Ethan's shovelhead straight up the private east ramp. No stealth now, no service corridors, no staff hallways. The story had entered the public exposure phase of the competitor skeleton. The villain's truth collapses in front of the people trying to buy it. Luther and Wade followed close behind. 3 bikes, 1 dead brother's machine leading, the exact visual escalation this niche thrives on. At the top of the ramp, 2 black SUVs sat outside the executive entrance. Chicago Syndicate, corporate men in dark coats, no colors, no obvious muscle. That made them more dangerous. Money people, ledger buyers, men who treated old murders like real estate opportunities. The shovelhead's engine thundered across the concrete. Every head turned. Perfect. Older audiences love when the forgotten truth arrives in unmistakable physical form. The executive doors slid open. Inside, a long glass conference room overlooked the black desert. 10 men at the table. Marcus Wren at the head. Paler than before, hands weaker, but still wearing the same cold accountant stare. To his right, 2 Chicago acquisition lawyers. To his left, Victor Salazar's son. Dalton recognized the bloodline instantly. Same jaw. Same casino eyes, same polished cruelty. The generational reveal hit exactly where it needed to. This wasn't just 1988. The sons had inherited the father's corruption. Marcus looked up. For the first time in the entire story, his control cracked visibly. Not because Dalton arrived, because Dalton arrived on Ethan's bike. His eyes locked on the red tank, the old scratch near the throttle, the impossible resurrection of the night he spent 38 years trying to erase. "You found it," Marcus said quietly. Dalton stepped into the room, the ledger under his arm, Ethan's dog tags in his fist, the cassette recorder in his jacket. "No," he said. "My brother left it." The Chicago men exchanged glances, already irritated, already sensing volatility. Good. Volatility scared investors faster than morality ever could. The senior acquisition lawyer adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Wren, who exactly is this?" Dalton laid the black ledger onto the glass table. Hard. The sound cracked through the room. "Family audit." The phrase landed perfectly. Short, cold, memorable. Competitor-style confrontation lines always work best when they sound like moral bookkeeping. Marcus exhaled slowly. "We were finalizing a historical asset transfer." Dalton almost smiled, still calling murder history an asset. Beautiful villain consistency. He pulled out Ethan's cassette recorder and set it beside the ledger. The room changed. Not emotionally, legally. Because everyone at that table instantly understood what audio evidence meant. Salazar's son leaned forward. "What's on that?" Dalton looked directly at him. "Your father's voice." That line detonated the room. One of the Chicago lawyers sat back immediately. Risk recalculation. Exactly what Dalton wanted. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't play that here." Dalton ignored him. Pressed play. Static hiss. Then Ethan's voice filled the glass room. "This is Ethan Blackwood. Date is August 14th, 1988. The Chicago team froze. Lawyers stopped writing. Phones lowered. Eyes sharpened. Then Marcus's younger voice hit the speakers. "You're forcing my hand." Then Salazar. "He walks. The whole line burns." The son of Victor Salazar went pale, because now the corruption had become hereditary liability. The tape reached the gunshot. No one moved. Then Marcus's final line. "Get the bike. Move the body. We bury this under military transport." The tape clicked off. Silence. Absolute. The kind of silence only happens when money realizes it's sitting in a homicide room. The senior Chicago lawyer slowly closed his folder. "We're done here." Marcus's head snapped toward him. "You can't walk away." The lawyer's expression stayed dead neutral. "Oh, we absolutely can." That public collapse beat is essential for outperforming competitor pacing. The villain loses buyers before freedom. Salazar's son stood abruptly, his voice low and furious. "My father told me Ethan died federal." Dalton looked at him. "And now you know what your family really inherited." The man's face hardened, not at Dalton, at Marcus. Exactly where Dalton wanted the blame redirected. Marcus tried one last pivot. "The ledger still protects all of you." Dalton opened it to the page with the 1988 entries, then turned it toward the Chicago table. 42 names, 42 payments, 38 years of blood interest. The lead lawyer stood. "No syndicate in Chicago wants a ledger tied to recorded homicide." The phrasing was beautiful. Cold money language destroying old blood mythology. Marcus's breathing became shallow. Cancer, panic, loss of leverage, all collapsing together. Then Dalton pulled the final weapon. Ethan's note copy, not the original from the lake. A photographed duplicate Wade made earlier. He placed it in front of Marcus. "Don't let them turn me into the wrong kind of dead." Marcus stared at the line. His hands trembled. For the first time, not just sickness, conscience, delayed by 38 years, but finally undeniable. The Chicago men started gathering their files. Deal dead. Sale over. Legacy collapse complete. But Dalton wasn't done. He looked at Salazar's son. "Your father panicked and pulled the trigger." The man froze. Dalton slid the manifest across. Federal tags, Vegas routing, original Salazar signatures. "This is what your family built on." For older audiences, the moral reversal is crucial. The next generation must face inherited sin. Salazar's son stared at the papers, then slowly looked at Marcus. "You used my father's fear to build your empire." Marcus said nothing, because it was true. The room's power had fully inverted. No longer Marcus's boardroom, now Ethan's courtroom. Dalton stepped to the head of the table. The shovel head visible through the glass behind him, the ledger open, the tape still warm from playback, the buyers leaving. Then he asked the only question left. "Where is Ethan buried?" The line hit like thunder. Because this was the final truth still withheld, Marcus lowered his eyes. A long silence. Then, voice nearly gone. "Old freight yard north of Carson, warehouse 12, concrete floor." A swallow. "Wren logistics site." Dalton closed the ledger. There it was. Not just proof, not just revenge, not just legacy. A grave. A real place. A place Thomas Blackwood could finally visit before he died. Marcus looked smaller now than any man Dalton had ever seen. Not because of illness, because he no longer controlled the story. Dalton leaned closer. "You stole 38 years from my father." Marcus's eyes stayed on the table. "Yes." Dalton's voice dropped to its coldest point yet. "Then the rest of your life belongs to the truth." Outside the glass wall, the shovelhead sat under the casino lights like a witness returned from the dead. And somewhere north of Carson, beneath a concrete floor, Ethan Blackwood had been waiting 38 years for his family to find him. They reached Warehouse 12 just before dawn. The freight yard north of Carson stretched silent beneath a bruised violet sky, rusted loading cranes frozen like skeletons over cracked concrete and dead rail lines. Wren Logistics. The old sign still clung to the building like a lie too stubborn to die. Dalton killed Ethan's shovelhead at the chain-link gate. This place didn't feel abandoned. It felt withheld. Luther used the copied keys Marcus surrendered in the boardroom. One still worked. The padlock clicked. The gate groaned open. Inside, the warehouse smelled of diesel, dust, and trapped rain. Dalton's flashlight cut across rusted forklifts, broken shelving, and old freight pallets stacked like forgotten graves. Then the beam landed on the floor. One section of concrete looked newer. Cleaner seam, different color, a rushed repour. Luther saw it too. There, every step Dalton took toward that slab carried the weight of 38 stolen years. Thomas waiting in the dark house, the metal box, the $30, the question about bread and soup, all of it had led here. Wade called county investigators immediately. No vigilante digging, no chaos. For this audience, the sun restores dignity through lawful truth. By sunrise, coroner teams and Washoe County investigators arrived. Quiet professionals, no sirens, no spectacle, just respect. Concrete saws cut into the slab. The scream of the blade through the warehouse sounded like history refusing to let go. Then the slab broke open. 42 inches below the surface, human remains, boot fragments, a rusted belt buckle, a shattered zipper, and then a steel lighter. E.B. Dalton froze. Their father had given Ethan that lighter on his 21st birthday. A simple object, a lifetime of proof. The lead coroner lifted her eyes. "We'll confirm, but this is him." Dalton stepped outside into the breaking sunrise and called Thomas. The old man answered on the first ring. No greeting, just breath. Dalton stared east across the freight yard. "We found him." Silence. Then Thomas asked the only question a father would ask. Was he alone? Dalton looked back through the open loading door at the coroner team surrounding the broken slab. "No," a pause. "He's with us now." The line held for a long moment. Then Thomas whispered, "Bring him to your mother." By noon, the cemetery outside Reno stood under a pale Nevada sky. Thomas Blackwood was already waiting beside his wife's grave. 76 years old, army cap, hands trembling, Ethan's metal box resting against his chest. When Dalton arrived with the county vehicle behind him, the old man didn't move. Couldn't. 38 years of grief had finally reached a real place. The county team laid the recovered remains with full dignity beside the Blackwood family plot. No fake military honors, no folded lie, just truth. Dalton placed Ethan's lighter beside the grave marker, then the dog tags, then the Bronze Star and Purple Heart metal box Thomas had almost sold for bread. The old veteran knelt slowly, painfully. His fingers touched the grave soil as if relearning his own son. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Thomas whispered, "They told me he died a hero." Dalton stood beside him. He did. Thomas looked up, confused, broken, hopeful. Dalton's voice stayed steady. "He died trying to tell the truth." The old man's face changed, not into happiness, into peace, the kind that only comes when confusion finally dies before the body does. A county chaplain stepped forward and quietly read the final identification confirmation. Ethan Blackwood. The name hit harder than any confession Marcus gave, because now it was real. Thomas removed his army cap and placed it on the grave. For older audiences, this gesture lands as the highest form of paternal surrender and honor. Then he said the line that completed the father arc. He comes home beside his mother. Dalton's eyes burned, not from grief, from alignment, the whole family finally restored to truth. As the county team stepped away, Wade approached with the black ledger. 42 names, he said quietly. 17 families still don't know. Dalton looked from the ledger to Ethan's grave. This story was ending, but Ethan's justice was not. Sunrise spilled gold over the Nevada highway the next morning. Dalton rode Ethan's red shovelhead south out of Reno with the black ledger strapped behind him. The dog tags hung from the handlebars, clicking softly against chrome every time the road shifted beneath him. Behind him, the city faded into heat shimmer and desert light. For the first time in 38 years, the Blackwood family no longer lived inside a lie. Thomas remained at the cemetery after dawn, seated beside the grave with Ethan's medal box in his lap and the old army cap shadowing his eyes. Not broken, not hungry, not ashamed, at peace. That transformation is exactly what gives the ending 65+ emotional weight. The parent survives long enough to see the child restored. Miles ahead, the Nevada highway opened into desert horizon. Dalton stopped once at an overlook above the valley. He removed the black ledger and opened to the remaining names. 42 corrupt signatures, 17 families, decades of stolen sons, brothers, and fathers. Marcus Wren's empire had fallen. But the road Ethan died protecting was bigger than one grave. Dalton touched the dog tags hanging from the bars, then Ethan's lighter in his jacket, then the first family name in the ledger. This was no longer revenge. It was restoration. The shovelhead roared back to life. A machine once buried inside murder now carried truth across Nevada. As Dalton rode into the sunrise, the camera of the mind holds on one final image. The red Harley, cutting through desert gold, dog tags glinting, ledger secured behind him, a brother's memory finally turned into a mission. Not to punish the dead, but to bring the living home.